we brought some of the most powerful voices that you will hear this weekend. And that is the voices of our sisters who have been working tirelessly in the Dawah.
There's a lot of push and pull in different ideologies in the identity of a woman.
People genuinely are unaware of what our faith teaches about the roles, duties, responsibilities of women. And more or less it's skewed with the public perception that we see in the media that Muslim women are oppressed, Muslim women don't have these rights, and so on and so forth.
Once you have the confidence and the education to understand that your religion is the truth, it's very much easy to bring your religion forward in a non-Muslim setting.
Because a lot of them view it as, it's not culturally popular, or it's shifting away from what I like.
You'll find that there's a big gap between what culture dictates, what we've been brought up with, versus what is in the Islamic faith.
No, I'm not worried at all. I rely on God, Allah.
On behalf of the Lifehawk team, thank you for watching this video. And for more clips and beneficial content, please subscribe to the Lifehawk channel, your #1 source for personal Islamic development.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have an amazing session planned for you today. We brought some of the most powerful voices that you will hear this weekend. And that is the voices of our sisters who have been working tirelessly in the Dawah. They've taken leadership roles, they've taken initiatives, they've set examples. They've been in the thick of things representing Islam with strength and dignity. And so it's actually an honor to have all these sisters together in this panel. And we're actually going to discuss many of the issues and focus on a lot of the issues that the sisters are facing and come up with, inshallah, pragmatic and practical, hopefully, advices and solutions. And to help us do that is we have with us Sheikh Abdurrahmann Murad, the one, the only Sheikh Abdurrahmann Murad, mashallah, tabarakallah. And it's always a pleasure having him with us, and for him also to help in the conversation and contribute with his advice and his, of course, his knowledge. So I want to start off things out of the gate running. And so I want to talk to the sisters here, and I want to ask you, especially since you've been fresh off United Islam Awareness Week, what are the greatest challenges in the Dawah specifically facing the sisters?
I can address this first, if that's okay. So, Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Syed, for your question. That's greatly appreciated. I think, one of the main challenges I think that we can speak to as women in Dawah is I think that there's a lot of push and pull in different ideologies in the identity of a woman. So I think, on one half, you kind of have really strong set of cultural values from whether it's Western culture or some of the cultures that we've grown up in with our families, that kind of being imposed, as well as the other extreme of maybe feminist values that are being imposed. And then we also have, of course, our Islamic values and those kinds of pieces of what our role should be, and especially in giving Dawah. So I think that is a really big challenge in the push and pull of, our hearts and minds, and those kinds of different identities creeping in and those different ideologies.
Any other sisters want to come in? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I can go. I can agree with what Rabia said, and I also think there's a challenge in trying to get other sisters and other youth trying to get really interested in Dawah work as well, because a lot of them view it as, it's not culturally popular, or it's shifting away from what I like. So then they're not really prone to being interested in that, and that does hinder the efforts that we're trying to do for those future generations as well.
Sheikh Murad, maybe you can get in here as well, and you can comment on some of the things that the sisters are saying here.
Of course. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again, always a pleasure to be here with you all, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every one of you and give you khair in dunya and in the akhirah. Ameen. And just a dua for everyone in the face of this pandemic. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to alleviate the difficulties and harms that we face and to replace it with khair, inshallah, and that each and every one of us would become stronger, with all that we've faced, and that we would no doubt strive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a more persistent way after all of this. Ameen. The issue of, this whole issue in of itself is one I think that is commonly discussed. In specific, the issue of culture versus faith. And when it comes to women's rights, the roles, what does culture dictate? What does it state? And then what is the faith, your Islamic faith? What does it state? What I found more often than not, subhanAllah, is that, people genuinely are unaware of what our faith teaches about the roles, duties, responsibilities of women. And more or less it's skewed with the public perception that we see in the media, that Muslim women are oppressed, Muslim women don't have these rights, and so on and so forth. But if we're to go back to the Quran and Sunnah to inquire genuinely as to what rights are, belong to the woman, what are they required to do, you'll find that there's a big gap between what culture dictates, what we've been brought up with, versus what is in the Islamic faith. And, I think one of the greatest examples of this is in terms of marriage. You're going to find a cultural take on marriage, and you're going to find a strong Islamic take on marriage. And the sad thing is, although we've been taught, we repeat often the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in specific the hadith, "Da'uha fa innaha muntina," where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Leave it aside, for it is rotten." And of course, he was referring to one, being attached to culture in that negative way. It's not that culture is bad. No, culture has good parts to it, definitely. But when, being attached to a cultural, you can say, norm goes against the Islamic teachings, and that's when it's considered a bad, inappropriate thing. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, "Da'uha fa innaha muntina." Don't hold on firmly to these cultural practices and norms that contradict Islamic teachings. The sad thing is, and I've come across this multiple times across almost every single city that I've been to, where people believe culture to be the true Islamic teaching. So when they're actually given the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or an ayah of the Quran, leave the hadith, an ayah of the Quran, they're ready to reject all of that, putting it aside as though it's nothing, on account of what they were brought up with and what their forefathers taught them and what their culture dictates upon them. And it's wallahi very sad, but this is a reality. It can only be removed and rectified when we kind of strive to educating ourselves and imparting that ilm upon the future generations. Now, one of the sisters said that it's not culturally popular. That is true as well. You'll find, Islam in general, sometimes the faith aspects of it not being culturally popular, not fitting in with the narrative of today, subhanAllah. And you'll find people putting aside parts of their faith because they feel that if they hold to their faith, they're going to appear out of place.
Can I clarify something with the sisters, Sheikh? When you mentioned that it's not culturally popular, sisters, is that in reference to exclusively, Muslims, cultural from Muslim countries, or are you also talking about the dominant prevailing culture here in North America? So are you talking about just the Muslim culture, or are you saying it's culturally also not popular from a Canadian perspective, like a Canadian cultural perspective?
Yeah, I think I would say kind of both. I think culturally,
Yes.
I think definitely where we are in the West. I agree. I don't think it's just specifically targeted towards like you said, Muslim countries, but yeah, I definitely think it's both.
What do you feel is the most resistant for like your involvement in the Dawah? Do you feel like culture from countries where a lot of our forefathers immigrated from? Do you feel that is the most resistant for you to be involved in the Dawah, or the culture that we see here being born and raised in Canada? what do you think is the most resistance to you in terms of like doing the dawah or getting involved or taking a role?
I think, well, for me specifically, probably the West, and like where we are here growing up. It's not something that's outwardly, like you're not invited to do that. And we can see even just by having like United Islam Awareness Week, it's not something that's accepted. It's not wanted. People just don't want to accept it. So I think, yeah, we're being much more pushed away here, where we're so-called different and not normal. So,
Iqra, you want to jump in too? I see that you have some comment.
Sure. I actually thought it was the other way around, or at least for me. I feel the Muslim culture is harder to overcome simply because of the ignorance. So with like the Western culture, once you have the confidence and the education to understand that your religion is the truth, it's very much easy to bring your religion forward in a non-Muslim setting. But then with people of the same culture, you face a different level of difficulty altogether. The challenge isn't that there isn't that they lack the education. It's just that they do not want to take part, and that becomes difficult, especially when you're trying to do events and you're trying to like push towards dawah work. There will be people who question why is this necessary, and that question becomes so much harder to answer when it comes from other Muslims, and it brings down the overall morale. So we end up discussing issues like once they happen. So like the Switzerland ban on the hijab, we'll discuss it once it's happened. But in the Muslim community, we won't take the opportunity to teach about modesty ahead of time, to talk about why these issues are important. So we're so reactive, and people will only step up when it's a reaction instead of being proactive about it. And that's the difficulty in dealing with like the Muslim community.
I find that interesting. So Saraya is saying that she finds the dominant culture here in the West the most resistant. You're saying, the culture that you feel from, our parents' home, like homeland. Now, I want to ask a question. Maybe you can find out the root cause of like this difference of your experiences. Iqra, do you feel more a part of your parents' culture, or do you feel more a part of Western culture?
I would say I feel more a part of the Western culture in the sense that the Pakistani culture has a lot of roots. It has many good things, but it has a lot of roots from British colonialism and from Hinduism. So when you account for that, you understand that there's a lot of innovation taking part. So coming to Canada, I was able to distinguish between what is Islam and what is culture. And so in that sense, I'm not very close to the Pakistani culture and their traditions. But at the same time, in terms of Western culture, I also don't agree with many of like ideologies like feminism. So I don't know where I would fall.
No, you know what I would say, a better way for me to phrase that is, which culture do you find more influential in your life? Like, what kind of food are you eating at home? What kind of dress are you doing? Like, what kind of arts and culture? Of course, Pakistani culture, right? That's what I'm trying to get down to, is that you feel like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, if you grew up here and you're exposed to Western music and you're always wearing Western dress and you're eating mac and cheese, for lunch, dinner, whatever, you know what I mean? So then maybe perhaps then when you feel more part of the Western culture, you're going to feel more resistance. So maybe that's I'm trying to find out why like your experiences are a little bit different. Like, one's like, okay, I'm getting the most resistance because of course Islam can live in any culture, but like the culture in and of itself, if it doesn't have Islam, is going to be resistant to Islam. That's what I'm kind of perceiving. Rida, what do you have to say about that?
I would have to agree with Sister Iqra that,
it's easier for us to fall into that frame, because at home we obviously eat biryani and paratha at home, and then outside we have the Western culture, and coming from Ikra's point of view, it's harder to deal with the own Muslim community, because like I believe Murad said, you're battling, my forefather did this, they did that, I will continue to do that, and they forget the Quran and Sunnah at the end of the day, and I think that's a really big issue.
Fiza, can I get you into the conversation as well? What do you think are effective ways of Muslimahs forging their own identity in the midst of all these cultural influences?
I think that one thing would be to first and foremost educate yourself, because for me, like, gaining that education about Islam is what made me realize that certain things we were doing on an everyday basis weren't correct. Secondly, it's like you don't compromise your faith. Like, if there's a certain thing you cannot do, you have to step away and say, you guys are my family, you're my culture, and I love this, but I'm not going to be a part of that. And if you don't force it on other people, like, I've noticed that the biggest moments when people are given the most impactful dawah is when people are just kind of subtly showing it in their character and in their actions. So if you do it in that way over, I feel, a long period of time, and you do it in the best way possible, and you have patience, obviously, then other people will start to recognize she's not going to compromise her faith for her culture, and that's something that I should respect and perhaps apply as well.
So, Sarah, actually, if I could get a comment from you, based to build upon what Fiza said, is that, if we are going to challenge cultural norms, especially if it's coming from our parents, who are setting the tone, have you found yourself in a situation where you're trying to do this balancing act of like doing what you think is right and not disrespecting your parents when you challenge them? Have you ever found yourself in a situation like that? And how have you dealt with it?
Definitely, yeah. Especially, I think in the context of dawah too, it's often like you're doing too much dawah, but to us it really feels like too little dawah. I know, like earlier at the booth, some of the sisters were talking, and like we feel things that like salah and hijab are the bare minimum, and so when we often try to do more than that, when we really try to do that dawah that's an obligation upon us, it is met by resistance from our families. And I think for myself, I find if I explain to my parents and to my family, what is the purpose, and they actually see the impact, especially with UIW, when you see, sisters who start wearing hijab and, perhaps taking shahada, and they actually see that impact. I just try to like explain to them and communicate to them, and also try to get them involved. So, that could be as simple as taking the lecture and setting it up in the living room on the TV so everyone can listen together, or bringing those conversations onto the dinner table. I think it's hard if we just try to like force it on them, or, if, we're in a conference or we're away for a while and they don't really know what we're doing. I find that if I involve them and invite them to these things and, share that with them, then like they've been a lot more understanding and even asking more about it and getting involved in that way.
Sheikh Murad, I want to get your advice in here as well now. Even coming from a fiqh perspective, obviously in the fiqh, we respect culture, right, to a degree. How do we move forward with cultural, negative, you could say, cultural influences that are preventing our sisters from taking significant roles in the dawah, or being able to bring the consistency that's required oftentimes to achieve, sometimes goals within the dawah?
Shaykhna, I think, subhanAllah, what the sisters have mentioned are very important first steps to basically address the issue of culture and how to balance that culture, Islamic dynamic within the home, within everyone's life. But I'll just add 2 points to what they've mentioned, because mashallah, they've mentioned, I think, what would suffice in this topic. But overall, we do have a guideline that states al-'ada muhakkama. This is a general guideline which states in general, in a rough translation, that the cultural norms can be held and lived with as long as they don't contradict Islam. So in essence, of course, we all live with cultures. We all have our unique cultural makeup, our background, what we're used to. It's not that this is all haram. No, you live with it. But as long as it does not go against the Islamic teachings, you're good. Alhamdulillah. Like I said, there's certain flashpoints where we have topics that do come up. And in those areas, we have to be very careful that we don't toss aside Islamic teachings for the sake of culture. That's the first point. Second of all, I mean, in terms of balancing, the culture with our parents, because our parents most likely are more culturally in tuned and they're more attached to culture than we are. I mean, being born over here in the West, our cultural attachment has really been diluted, almost entirely at times. So how do we go about addressing our parents who may think that we're doing too much da'wah, that we should basically tone everything down, adhere to what they're doing? I would say, although you might want to, basically, diverge and go away from them, do have a respectful approach when you deal with them. So that would entail, for example, going about this in a very wise way. And I'll share with you one hadith to kind of clarify my point. The hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was approached by a man who wanted to go out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah ﷺ said to him, in that conversation, who have you left behind? He said, my mother and my father, who are both crying. He said to that companion, no, don't come with us. You go back to your mother and father and make them happy as you made them sad. So in essence, to prioritize at times that relationship, to kind of build it strong between yourself and your parents, keeping in mind always that in the end, we prioritize Allah as a first, but then we're not to be rude or disrespectful to our parents. We do what we must. We perform the duty of da'wah, maybe in different ways. It might not be in person, but it could be online. Alhamdulillah, there's so many opportunities before us. Jazakallah khair.
Rabia, I'm going to pivot here to another topic, and it might be a little bit controversial. It may or may not be. I think it depends on your perspective. But are you a feminist? Why or why not?
Do I feel that the New York police are providing enough protection, or do I have to have protection of my own? I look for protection from Allah.